when the world's too dark of a place to be, and you need an escape from reality. Open up those pages, it's sci-fi or fantasy, whatever genre you please. And join a book club, 'cause you won't read it on your own. Join a book club, so you'll be held accountable. It's just a means to an end, but you're doing it with your friends, so join the book club by DLC.
Woo! There it is. It's time to dance. It's time to talk books. It's time for the DLC Book Club. Welcome, folks. Thanks for being with us. I'm Jeff Kanata. I'm here with Lana Bashinsky. Hi, Lana.
Hello, good morning. Lots to talk about this
Holy
week.
moly. Holy moly. This book.
Is that something that we could just like make a recording of and then just be like, time to start the show? Lots to talk about this week.
Every time. So we are going to be talking about chapters 6, 7, and 8 of Deadhouse Gates, which is the second novel of the Malazan Books of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. We have been reading along on this massive 10-book series, and we are in the second book. Second book of the second novel, chapters 6, 7, and 8. That's what we'll be covering today. We won't have any spoilers yet. We always have our non-spoiler section first, but just as an overview, I texted you as I was reading this week going, how is this book this good? How is this book this good?
I feel like the way that I feel is so well controlled. I read it part of a chapter with some of the characters and I'm like, oh, I love these characters. I read it part of a chapter with these other characters. I hate these characters, but in the way that I think you're intended to. And I feel very engrossed in I just love it. It's great.
There is something magical about reading a book. You know, they call it a page turner, but there's like this moment that I all too rarely find where I'm like breathlessly reading the next page and the next page, and I'm just so caught up in the moment, and then there'll be this second where I just like take a moment and go, this is incredible. And I had that
like a physical reaction. Like I can't believe my heart is like racing, reading about the excitement of happening to these other characters. For me, I know it's that moment when like my husband will try and be like, oh, I heard this thing today, and I'm like annoyed. I'm like, I really need you to not talk to me while I'm in the middle of this.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing I can't believe is people are like, well, the series really gets good with book 3. I'm like,
I know.
This is incredible right now. This is like we're early on. We haven't even gotten to halfway through this second novel, and you know, I don't know. It's so good. Anyway, we'll get to it. We'll get to all of it. We'll try to cram as much as we can in because three chapters, a lot happens. But first, we'll do our little non-spoiler topic, which we like to do for folks that might not be reading the same book we are, but still enjoy talking about reading. And I wanted to bring up a topic with you this week, Lana. I think both of us at this point are reading Deadhouse Gates on Kindles, which is kind of how I've converted most of my reading. Like 90% of the things that I read are on Kindle at this point. It's just much more convenient for me. I can read at night without having to turn on an external light because I have the Paperwhite that has the backlighting, which I love. It's just convenient. But I do love reading physical, old dead tree books.
Yeah.
And most of the reading of my life, was pre-Kindle and involved that stuff. And I think there are some traditions, rituals, manners with which people deal with paperbacks and hardcovers. And I'm so curious about what your experience with that is. Specifically, keeping your page, there's people who like fold the corner over of their book. There's people who use with a hardback will use the dust jacket to put it into the page. People have bookmarks. Like, what was your reading ritual? Was it consistent to every book you read, or did you do it differently from book to book? What was your ritual with that?
I think this question is very interesting because I do feel like my relationship with like the physicality of books has changed over time, and it did feel very ritualistic. I remember growing up, I was very romantic about books, and I'm like, there's nothing better in the world than a book that looks so well loved. But so I tried to do like the fold down and be like every like seam that's on the spine of this book is just a sign that you loved it, you were engrossed in it, this is your thing that you had an experience with, and at the end it has the scars to like show it.
Yeah.
And I tried doing like the fold the corner down, and that I just thought was annoying because then all the pages kind of like stick up, and I was like, oh, well, that's not part of it.
Too much love. Too much love.
That's too far. And then so for a long time I was like, you know what's even like cooler than that? I'm like, what if before I would put down a book, I would always sort of hold it up and look at it like the spine of it this way,
Yeah,
or the top down, and I would be like, okay, I am approximately 1/8 of the way through the book, and then I'd put it down. No bookmark, no nothing.
What?
And then when I'd get back to the book, I would just find my page again. I
You're
was
like some
like,
kind of savant. I don't understand. You're like one of those magicians that can like take a deck of cards and go 13 cards. There's 27 cards in the.
I don't know why I was like so determined to like that to be my thing, to be like, time to start reading. I found it. Like
That's truly incredible. Here's the fun discovery moment for me, which happens every week, which is, I had this, we're friends. We talk about video games on DLC podcast. We've been friends for years. I'm like, hey, you want to do a podcast about reading? I know you like reading. Yeah. Little did I know, I found like the high mage of reading. I found like you're like your superpower is reading. It's incredible.
I don't see. That's not that. That's very. Thank you. That's so generous. I feel like reading has never been my superpower, or at least like English was like a subject. Like I like reading, I like writing, but not in the ways that they like want you to do in class. So I always got good grades because it was important to me to get good grades, but I like hated it. I find it like excruciating to read the way I thought people were supposed to read. And even the idea of a book club in the past I've never done a book club before, but I always thought people were like analyzing like, what was the symbolism? What's the, adjectives or like whatever.
Adjectives.
Like the words around reading and writing. And then I had friends who like
thought we were just diagramming sentences all day long.
Oh my God.
Which is the past participle?
Here's like what my friends were like. If you want like the high mage of reading, like I guess book analysis. I took a sci-fi and fantasy class in college, and my buddy Rob took the class as well. We started reading a book. He was like, I hate this book. I'm not reading it. And I was like, okay. And then every week before class, we would get lunch, and I would just kind of loosely explain to him what happened. He got a higher grade than I did because he was better at analyzing the book. And I was like, I'm a shit reader. I'm a bad reader.
you were just his cliff notes.
Exactly. Like the fact that you have like this perception, I guess maybe like what I get from reading works really well for what we're doing here. But when it comes to like the perception of like, you really read that, I felt like I didn't like read it. Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. I think you have a warped idea of what the expectation. Maybe that is in the context of some sort of scholastic endeavor, with some sort of collegiate, analysis. I think that's where it comes from. But I mean, this is a whole other topic we could get into. But part of my I have a bugaboo about how it's presented in the education system, how reading and how basically learning is presented as it. No one tells kids, and I hope to do this with my kids, but no one tells kids that like, hey, we want you to read this because we think it's the best stuff that was ever written. Like, you have to read To Kill a Mockingbird, not because it's a chore to read To Kill a Mockingbird, because we think it's the best thing. We all loved it so much. We want all the kids to read it. it's frustrating to me how it's presented as rote and chore-like instead of we picked out the best of the best because
that
it's
humanity
important.
is ever.
Yes, our culture thinks it's so important that you read this because a person sat down and tried to write the best story they could, and they knocked it out of the park. You know, like like that's why we want you to read this.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, I won't go off on that tangent. I'm right there with you. I could go on a long rant about that.
Yeah,
but looping all the way back down to your original question. My bookshelf does not look like a bunch of well-loved books now because since I got the Kindle, my philosophy has been I will read it on the Kindle because that is what is convenient. But if I love a book, I will buy a physical copy. And so my bookshelf is only books that I want to recommend to people.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, I still want to support physical media. I still want to support publishing.
Yeah.
But the Kindle's so good, man. I'm not going to give up. I'm not giving up the Kindle.
I do think the Kindle is my favorite way to read. And it's a bummer to me. 'Cause I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I was reading Deadhouse Gates this week in my bedroom, and my son comes waltzing in and he goes, "Hey, Daddy, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm reading, buddy." I was like, try to show him how much I love reading as a kind of, learning by example, and say, "Hey, this is a fun activity. Even your dad loves to do this." So I'm like, "Hey, I'm reading." He's like, "No, you're not." I was like, "Yes, I am." He goes, "But Daddy, that's a computer." And I was like, "But look, there's a book on it." He's like, "That's not real reading, Daddy." And I was like, I'm going to need to buy the physical book just to be in front of him. Like, look, I'm doing the real thing.
Paper.
So there's still, there's something about it that's still not, I don't know. I do enjoy turning a physical page. For me, it's just at this point, they're too big and bulky. I've moved too many times. Every time I move, I'm like, I got to get rid of half of these books because I can't keep hauling around all these books, and
it's expensive.
It's expensive, and it's not just books; it's everything. I have fewer things because it can all be so much of it can be digital now. Like I used to have like the DVD shelf where people could walk in and know me by looking at my DVD shelf or whatever.
Oh
books
my gosh,
are the same way, but all that stuff is just not in my life anymore.
It's another type of collection. Like my parents collect antique potato mashers. I wouldn't be caught dead with 300 antique potato mashers. I would prefer. They also collect books, but like
I wish that you had just made that up and pulled that out of your brain. But I sense that's a real thing that they collect.
It's very real.
I wish you were just like antique potato mashers.
I wish, we all wish it was made up. But like, that's, I think, it's like a practical collection. People have like those little, especially like as gamers, lots of people have their figurines, their favorite things. People collect trains. It's like this is where I'm investing the money I'm putting into moving every time.
Well, there you go. I mean, I think that's smart. And there is definitely that thing. I like going into other people's houses and looking at their bookshelf and getting a read on them, or even better. Have you ever done this? Have you ever stayed at an Airbnb and like looked at the bookshelf and you're like, oh, these are the kind of people that own this place.
Yes.
You're like, oh, it's all Tom Clancy books. And I mean, I've read a lot of Tom Clancy in my day, but at a certain point you go, that's too much Tom Clancy.
That's a lot of Diana Gabaldon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, it's too many biographies of the wrong kind of people. I don't know. Anyway, well, that was a fun topic, but I feel like we have so much to get to.
Yes.
I don't want to spend any more time on that because I want to talk about Deadhouse Gates, chapters 6, 7, and 8. So let's do it. Spoilers starting now for Deadhouse Gates, chapters 6, 7, and 8. And Lana, last week we mused that, Fellison has really hit rock bottom. Can't get any worse for Fellison.
How about Fellison is getting things worse for me emotionally? Like, Fellison is like, It's like, she's so sad. We sort of get like the big, like almost the scope of teen, like what a teenager could be between Crocus's like very ignorance is bliss existence, don't really care about anything other than the one thing I'm thinking about right now, versus Felison, who's like intolerably angsty.
Yes.
And she's been through so much, and we get it. The worms bit you all up now. Like, she's killing me, man. She's killing me.
I was going to get to my big question is like, how do you feel about Felison now? But I feel like you just answered that.
Sorry.
No, that's great. Because I am still very simple. I'm still rooting for her hard, even though she's a total B to people. But I mean, this first scene of chapter 6, where we get the beginning of the riot. Last week I was like, oh, I hope there's a prison break. Oh, there's a prison break.
Yeah.
And we get basically these chapters are like the S is hitting the F everywhere. The it's just
don't say fan.
Yeah, can't say fan. The rebellion is breaking out. The whirlwind is hit. Everybody is rising up, back on the streets. On a number of like everywhere, all at once, all at the same time, including in the Skullcap mines. And one of the things I love about Erikson's writing is how these big moments come out of nowhere. It's so fun when it's just like we're walking down the street and, oh, there's some guys over here. Oh, it doesn't feel like you should walk over to those guys. I'm going to walk over to rebellion, mass murder. It's just, these flashes of action, these things that you feel like you're kind of lulled into a state of calm for a moment. And then these huge things come out of nowhere. And I always feel like he is taking us to the most important moment. He strips away so much of the fat and he just gets to like the meat of the situation. It's just the most important moments of these people's lives. And so that's why every chapter feels like it's thrilling and we're crescendoing every couple of pages. It's crazy.
I feel like stop me or don't. I'm going to say it. If I said it last week, I'm saying it again. I also think that it feels like you'll have like a small lull and a character's like talking and then like literally something like bursts out of the ground or like something happens so instantaneously.
Yes.
There's not like nobody seems to have like a spidey sense. So there's not a time in the world where somebody's like, seems like there might really be a problem. Even the people who might say that sentence, it gets cut off after they say, it seems like it, like, the problem is here now.
Right.
And I feel like that is very reflective of like when disaster strikes. I think so, like it feels resonant because it does feel like it comes out of like, oh my gosh, something's horrible happening right now. And it wasn't horrible one moment ago. It feels, I don't know, it really sucks me in. It makes me feel.
Yeah, anything can happen at any time. And you just feel like it's always the most interesting stuff that's compressed into, these tight confines. It's and that's what we had at the beginning. I talk about Felison, we thought she hit rock bottom. Here, she's still trying to, stick to her life and with Benneth. And then Benneth goes and he's got this group of his little
lackeys,
slave lackeys, and they all get attacked by the rising rebellion, and she's bewildered. We're in this crazy sequence of like, okay, got to get out of here. Things are getting bad. Everything's on fire. Everybody's fighting. There's piles of bodies. Run! And where do we run? Well, we run into a larva of these. I mean, that sequence.
So it was like, I do think like that was, I really felt for her still then. And then she's so intolerable in the next couple chapters that I was like, okay, we get it.
Yeah.
Your life's tough. But like, so they're on the run. She's still with Heberick and Bowden is elsewhere. Doing some finishing touches. He's been gone for a while. Like he's
literally like living in the lake.
Yeah.
Like this guy, by the way, Bowden has moved up my favorite character
Oh,
list.
he badass.
He badass. He
I
badass.
like him.
Yeah, like planning the escape, living in the lake, scoping it all out. You know, he's like in the room all wet, like because he's been living in a lake for 2 weeks. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So they start legging it out because Duker's plan to sort of get Heberick out of there. Heberick finally was able to like sync up with someone, or no, he wasn't, but like
Yeah,
they had their
Pella like gave up on winking to Fellison. He's like, hey, you should really tell me that code phrase.
Yeah.
And she's just like, oh, I'm high. I don't get it. You know?
Yeah. So they are on their way to like their planned escape route that Bowden paved the way for. And as they're going, they're like, what's that noise? And it's like this basically bees, bugs, beetles of some kind that come around the corner in a massive horde and bite the crap or her whole body. Heberick's like, cover yourself in mud. And she's like, and he's like, my tattoos, I guess I'll be fine or whatever. And so Fellison's like, tried to cover herself in mud, but she immediately like head to toe, all over her body covered in these bites of these like blood beetles or something.
Blood flies. Yeah.
Blood flies.
And they don't just bite you. They impregnate
like
your face.
Yeah. They like spit their baby, like their larva eggs into you as they bite you. And they're everyone where that she has a bite. Heberick's fine. He happens to have a tincture that will help this. And like, imagine just like getting bit in like deep wounds of like, but like for a bug bite, deep wounds, and then having to take a tincture and jab your finger into every single wound on your body so a little worm can wriggle out. It was like,
that's the worst part. Is like even the tincture isn't just like we get rid of it. It's the tincture forces the thing to crawl out of you.
Yeah, it's really nasty. And then Heberick is he's like, like it's so sad. Like you were going to be scarred up. Like the thing that you have used to like, to use people in this camp and in your perception of like giving us this better life is like your beauty and your body. And now it is going to be completely scarred up. And he's like, this is brutal. And she's like, you don't know me, Dad. And then they make their escape into the lake. With the three
so
of them.
good. And that whole sequence of using the bladders and having to dive under the water and Bowden going down with the rope and just all of it is so visceral. I'm in it. It is exactly what I was hoping for last week, where I was like, man, I hope we get a cool escape scene. I mean, the coolest. The head of the camp sees them as like, you know what? I'm not even gonna be mad at you. I'm not even mad. I'm gonna go die over here because things are real bad.
He's like, as you go, you should try and, or was it Pella who finally saw them and was like, "Oh, you're leaving? You should look south."
Yeah.
Just in case you thought that's where you were going, you should consider not going that way.
Out of the frying pan into the fire, literally fire. Yeah, it's like, and they get into that cave and they see all the supplies and they're like, these aren't supposed to be here.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be over up there. That's not a good sign. But that whole sequence was just so phenomenal and so much fun to read. And yeah, I mean, he's so good at turning the screws on our characters. Like, it's bad for Fellison, but now it's even worse. She's got these bugs and it's even worse. It's even worse. And making it so hard. Everything is harder than we thought. They have this incredible plan. The plan's not working out. You know, they're going to meet Duker on the beach. We find out that that's going to be more complicated. Duker's not going to be there. You know, it's so good.
And then the last detail is that Beneth gets like his face scrunched in, and Fellison's like, we're not leaving without Beneth. And Bowden's like, oh, I'll go find him. And comes back, he's like, don't worry, dead. I got it. He died.
I don't know what happened. It was so weird.
Crazy, so random.
It's really cool, I think. I mean, it's I sense that you're a little frustrated with Fellison, but I love the illustration from the inside out, from her POV of Stockholm syndrome, you know, of her like, you know, she is in this horrible, horrible place, but she thinks, oh, Beneth is, you know, I gotta save him. I gotta be with him. I gotta, you know, I thought that was all very compelling.
Let me say this. I find it compelling. Maybe I think that she's like the angst that she has and like how much of a jerk she is to everybody is written so compelling. It is like,
Yeah.
it is so, maybe it's like too resonant. It's like, I remember being a little asshole. Like I remember being a teenage girl and being like, eh. And I like to think that I was always nice, but like her like saying even something halfway quippy, and then in her head she's like, I'll kill you someday. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember feeling rage as a teenager, and she has every outstanding, horrible reason to feel whatever rage I felt as a teenage girl to the millionth degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's it all tracks, but I'm just like, they're saving you. Shut up.
I know. You just be like, please, just come on. They're being really nice guys here.
Yeah.
But of course, she feels slighted, right? She feels like she compromised herself for their benefit and they're ungrateful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think all of that, it just tracks. It makes sense. I understand her psychology, and it's such good characterization. You know, it's these characters that you just desperately want to behave in a different way, but you totally understand why they're behaving the way they are.
I am rooting for her still. There's like a couple blips. So her and Bowden basically continually butt heads through all of the chapters, and Bowden gets bolder and bolder with being like, she's like, you let him die, and he's like, maybe I did let him die. What's it to you? And then like getting even more aggro. It's like, actually, I killed him myself because that guy sucks.
Yeah.
And her being like, you don't understand what I did for you. And he's like, what you did for us? It's like, that guy gave us nothing.
Right.
He gave us the smallest amount so that you would feel attached to him.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, is that true? And like I feel like the thought of that being true and all the sacrifices she feels like she made being actually worthless, not actually giving anybody anything. I am rooting for her to have those realizations and come out the other side.
Yeah.
With even Bowden, sorry, just sort of following their thread as they're traveling together through the desert. Eventually uses Felison's like, I'll be in your tent, or you should go to my tent and we can have a nice night. And he's like, okay. And goes to her tent and sleeps with her, and she tries to murder him, which he's like, obviously you were going to do that. And she's like, you used me? And he's like, almost like somebody else you knew who knew that you thought that you were using them, but they were using you. And she was like, is that familiar? Couldn't be, like, immediately moves past it, but like he's trying to show her in every way possible that he is not actually the bad guy, and Beneth is the person who's mistreated her and caused her to be in this way. And how Bowden is doing that, and how Felison is like, you see the little glimmers of realization, and I do have hope for her,
right?
But she's just so annoying.
I mean, I love all the verbal sparring that they do. You know, it's so fun how she's just in every single scene. And we're jumping ahead a bit, but you know, in those later chapters after they meet up with all the other sailors and stuff, where she's just like, they're like, hey, so what's the deal? He's like, that guy, no, don't worry about it. He sucks. That guy sucks too. You know, like don't get excited. He's a murderer. He murders everybody he meets, you know, like,
and then she goes back to Bowden and she's like, they look pretty strong. You seem pretty weak. I don't think you could take them. She's like, literally anybody that she can be a jerk to. She's like, you come here. You suck. You.
She's
here.
Like full Aubrey Plaza the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's very entertaining to read. And all the Felison chapters to me have been so excellent. Like, I just am so enamored with that dynamic of those three characters, and Heberic, and like the fact that they're at a certain point just gonna die, you know, just resigned to the fact that we're dead. We did it. It very much the best Prison Break sequences, you know, Shawshank being, you know, the prime example of just what someone is willing to do to get out of that situation. And Erikson's so good at just making it worse and worse and worse and worse. And this feeling of like, well, we're not going to make it until that last glimmer of hope, and then, we'll get to it. And then even that part is like, well, the people saving you show up and go, we need your help. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, what
my
an amazing
God.
moment, you need our help.
Do you see that we are like passing out from starvation and dehydration?
We have no water or food, and she's got face eggs. Come on. All right. So we're still in the first few scenes of chapter 6, but so we're hanging out with Duker and Culp, who are also the thing that's cool about these chapters, I think, is that we're seeing how this spontaneous rebellion, the Whirlwind, is affecting all the characters all at once. It's just, we snapped our fingers. Shaik somehow, even though she was murdered, did start the Whirlwind. So this rebellion is happening on numerous levels, on numerous fronts all across this continent. And so even they are like, well, let's get a boat. We're going to try to find a boat hanging around. Let's walk in here and see if anybody will sell us a boat.
So this is the thing I wanted to ask you. I mentioned it before we started recording today, but I was like, there's one piece of information that I probably just should have gone back and checked. What was Duker doing before this happened? I'm like, right, they're looking for a boat. I'm like, where are they? I just forgot.
Well, I mean, they're trying to get a boat to go pick up Heberick. Like, that was their whole goal, is we got to go. I promised this guy I would show up and pick him up.
Well, I knew that was the case, but I forgot that the thread was like, that's where he was like on his way to go do that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I was
so
just they're getting a boat.
Culp's like, I found this boat. And he's like, that's a terrible boat. He's like, yep, that is a terrible boat. Let's go find a better boat. And so they wander in, they find these awesome sailor dudes. And literally before they can even start negotiating how to get a boat, craziness breaks out again in this typical way with these books, where we're trying to do one thing and the events overtake us. And now we're caught up in all this even wilder Sturm and Drang, which is so much fun. Like, I love how that all plays out. Is I'm in the scene thinking we're doing one thing, and then the smallest little moment where the kid Truth is like, guys, there's a lot of yelling out
and then
here.
the bar's like peeling off of the ground.
Incredible.
And I love that scene. I also love like the very beginning where Duker's like, that's a crappy boat. And Culp's like, and he's like, can't you like open your, like, what's your warren again? Are you a mage? Can't you fix it? And he's like, oh yeah, my warren's the boat fixing warren.
Yeah.
And he's like, right, okay, yeah, I see that was dumb now.
Yeah, that was such a great moment.
Oh man.
Yeah,
So,
the humor is always so wonderful too. Yeah, these little blips of humor.
and getting into that bar, so it's them two looking for a boat, then other Malazan soldiers in the other side of the bar that you recognize by he has like sigils on his outfit.
Yeah.
And Culp notices that the sigil that has like the description of like, the stain, because the rest of the fabric is faded from the sun.
Right.
Like, and you could see underneath, it's like, you actually had the badge of somebody who had a higher rank than you presently have on your uniform. And so the guy comes up to like immediately assass them, and Culp is like, all right, you better, you want to go down to being a private now? Don't talk to us. Like, just notices it, insults him immediately. And it's just starts with that, like them feeling like, they're going to start headbutting. And then one of the young soldiers, Truth, is like, there's actually much bigger problems. And he's like, actually, do you want to be pals? Do you want to be best friends now? Let's get out of here.
Yeah. It's such an awesome sequence. And those sailor dudes have become immediately some of my favorite characters. Stormy and Truth and what's the guy? Gessler. Dude, so fun.
Yeah.
So, and the other cool thing is Duker's like, I know we had this plan. I know I was going to go save my fellow historian, but Coltane is going to be in trouble. I got to get on the horse and ride. And Culp's like, that is a terrible idea. Yeah. You know what? Maybe you can be disguised, but still terrible idea. All right, later. And I love the splitting up of those things, because it's another one of those things as a reader, you're like, oh no, we were doing this other thing. And now it's all, the plan is messed up. And you just feel the chaos of that. And it heightens the stakes on every level. Cause Culp's like, well, I'll still go find your boy for you. I'm probably never going to see you again, but I vowed that I would do this. So I'm gonna do it. And it's just awesome. And Duker, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then not only that, but like the sense of danger from Culp being like, I like that the scene starts with Culp being like, seems like he's got his stuff together. He is observant. He feels really powerful. He feels really in control when talking to Gessler, this soldier, and like very combative. And then immediately the whole bar is being picked up by the studs and ripped apart in like this wave of sorcery. And he's like, I am a much worse mage than that person. We running. The whole thing we doing right now, it's running. Yes. And I will throw illusions and be like, maybe I'm over there. Like so quickly the tables turn on like Culp's capability, and he's just like a sliver of hope for these people like hiding and being like, I really hope that mage doesn't just come evaporate us. Yeah. It becomes very tense very fast, and the whole time feeling very, I know, there's like the edge of sassiness to everybody, which I love. From Culp's interactions with Gessler originally, from Gessler to the bartender who's like, you owe us a tab. And he's like, how much is your life worth? And the bartender's like, the same as the tab. And he's like, good man.
I loved that. I thought that was so rad. I was like, yeah. And it's so much texture to all of it. And he's so good at, like I keep saying, putting impediments in front of the characters, making it harder. And that's the sign of such good plotting, I think, is you have this thing that is I'm already interested in, I'm already invested in, I'm thrilled to see how it plays out. Just the surface level A to B progression of, I know what these characters are trying to do, and I'm already invested in them doing it. And then it's like, no, it's going to be 12 times as hard. We got to do this, and we're splitting up, and we're just throwing that out. And it's like, I'm so much more invested in that journey because now it's so much more difficult. And how are they going to get out of this one? Okay, so then we check in with Mappo and Ikariam at Pust's place, the old Pust Trust. And this is a scene that I wanted to ask you about because I feel like it has implications that maybe we find out later in the chapters we read today, for today. But I didn't quite get it. So they're on the broom quest, right? And they find this fishing boat in a cave in a mountain miles from any water source. And they're like, that's weird. There shouldn't be a boat here. And that's the whole scene. And I feel like, what do you think that the symbolism of, or the meaning behind the fact that there's the boat there? Because I don't know if I quite grok what that's about.
Well, one of the things I liked about it is that Mappo and Ikariam also, both didn't. But the fact that Ikariam's like, look at this boat, beautiful boat. Do you recognize the woodwork? And Mappo's like, no, I'm not familiar with boats. And Ikariam's like, me neither. Yeah. Like, I also don't know much about boats. And it's like, okay. He's like, but I know this is what we're meant to find. Yeah. And I was like, what about the broom? He's like, the broom is just the journey. Or like, the broom is the destination. Yeah. This is the journey. They're like, okay, Ikariam. Sure, man. What the only sort of tenuous connection that I think is like, there's a mysterious sorceress figure in the clouds above the stormy ocean. Who is this person? Yeah. In the skies that is plaguing Culp and Gessler and eventually Felison and Heberick. So there's something happening in that water. Right. I'm like, that water mage
that
guy,
was my takeaway
boat.
Too, is that it's like symbolism, like they're going to be getting on a boat at some point. There's going to be, like, I feel like it was foreshadowing in a certain way, or that Pust's understanding of how all these people are going to come together. Like you're going to meet up with the sailors. But I wondered if there was more to that I'm not getting.
The other piece that feels very connected to it, to sort of jump to the very end, is, you know, we got the old ghost boat kind of thing that they find, and we find out that there is a few different Tisty Andy cultures. There's also there's 3, I guess, that are known about from this one book in history.
Right.
And one of them is, you know, Tisty Andy that we've met and we're familiar with, and then we see some Tisty Eren on the ghost boat.
Right.
And perhaps this is another tie-in with Tisty Eren, and I'd actually want to go back and see if there was like bone like
necklaces,
some of the things that they called out later in that chapter.
Yeah.
But that is sort of like the tenuous tie, is we found a couple freaky boats, Tisty Eren, some kind of sorcerer in the sky and the ocean. All those pieces seem connected to me somehow, but I don't know what the threads are.
Yeah. And I don't know Puss's deal yet. It's interesting now that we know he's a high priest of shadow, and we have this new context for what that means with Shadow Throne and all that. So I'm very and that whole sequence at the end, we'll get to that, and at the end of chapter 8. When they all meet up and Fiddler's like, who's this dude? I think all of that is really intriguing. All right, so let's we check in with Fiddler, Crocus, and Absalar. They're fleeing across the desert. Also, you know, the whirlwind is hitting them. They're in the face of this crazy sandstorm and being chased by those Grawl warriors that we know that they were chasing them for some reason. And awesome stuff there too, with Fiddler like shooting a bomb arrow at their feet and blowing them up. And there's, you know, spirits and a goddess riding the sandstorm alongside them. All that stuff. Awesome.
And just very cool visuals of them being like, okay, we have the Grawl who are definitely going to kill us.
Yeah.
And then we have this wall of sand that will probably kill us. And they're like, sand. All right, wall of sand. And they walk through it. And like the idea that they're like pushing through the brutal cutting winds, getting their skin all ripped up by the sands. And then suddenly a clearing, wind-free road has appeared.
Yeah.
Like the
road that shouldn't be here.
A road that shouldn't be here, but like people have also said that there's hidden roads sort of underneath the sand, and when the wind is just right. And it's like, I guess the wind being just right is a whirlwind.
Yeah.
And then Fiddler being like, well, I have some knowledge about a mythological place this would probably lead, which we later find out is the first. Ooh, I was so excited to read the first connection back to whatever that freaky deaky house was at the end of Gardens of the Moon.
Tremolor, I think, is what we're trying to find, which is another of these houses of begins with an A. I can't remember it.
Anath.
Yeah, that sounds right. Something like that.
It's not. It's something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, but clearly this is the Deadhouse. This is the Deadhouse, and the Deadhouse Gates are, you know, this idea that you can travel instantaneously between any of these houses on any of the continents. Awesome. Yeah, and that sequence was really cool. I love Crocus. He's like, I really thought whirlwind was a metaphor. I love that.
A sweet baby boy.
But that's awesome. And all the stuff with Duker, like finding the remnants of where Coltane and his band of refugees and warriors has gone, and reconstructing, as the historian, reconstructing what happened here in all these places. Like, oh, this battle must have happened. Oh my gosh, look at all these bodies. All that stuff I thought was neat too.
And the struggle for him to try and stay objective and basically failing. He's like, I need to witness this as a historian. And then he's like, this is so messed up that I really hope that all the Malaz are fine. Yeah. And I know that I shouldn't feel any one way because being a historian, but we gotta get it. I hope they got it. I think they stuck it to him, and apparently they did.
And apparently they did. And they, you know, running across those other, you know, native warriors who were part of the rebellion, and him being in disguise as one of them, and they're like, "Hey, come on, join us." He's like, "Oh, yo, Sonny, I can't." He's like, "No, it's cool. We're gonna go mess some stuff up. Let's just do it." He's like, "Oh, so I gotta go. My nephew, I gotta find it."
And they're like, "Listen here, old man." He's like, "You listen to me, kiddo." And they're like, "Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Okay, cool.
Right
I
on,
didn't mean to
right
make you
on."
mad, old guy. Yeah. That was neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His sort of ability to blend in. Was it the same people that he blended in with at the beginning of the book? I think so.
The Dossi? Yeah, I think so.
Dosai?
Yeah, I think he can. Yeah, or whatever it is. He can. For whatever reason, he can sort of pass as a native.
I forget the reasons why, but
yeah, he's able to do the accent and stuff. And so that that's like that's the one reason Culp was like, okay, take a horse and go, because they'll think you're one of them. So I guess you're not
good
100% getting killed.
Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say about that. Oh, even just I loved his analysis of this battle was a slaughter because there's no arrows present in any of the bodies. So they had time to go
get their arrows back.
Killed everybody, and then they were like, not waste, not what, not babies.
Yeah. It's so rad. Yeah, his deductive reasoning skills.
Yes.
Patching it all together and realizing, they forced them into these bottlenecks so they could murder them all, and it's just it's so rad. The other scene that's coming up now in this section of chapter 7 is that we skipped over when we were talking about Felison and Heberic and Bowden, is a really haunting scene that I think has bigger meaning than we know yet, which is that moment where they come upon this giant jade finger sticking out of the ground.
Yes.
And Heberic's like, "I'm gonna touch it." He's like, and just walks up and puts his stump on it, and then gets energized with the power of Fenner, the boar god. So I don't know what that's about, but the idea of this enormous jade statue that everybody's like, that shouldn't be possible to make one of those, and it's buried in the sand. Amazing.
And the description of it where they're like, oh yeah, there's some kind of bent column, I don't know, 100 yards away, and they're like, oh no, 5 miles away, the scale of it, and then being getting vertigo, being like, oh god, it's so large, we're so far, and just how the depth changes because they've no other points of context, basically. And then I was like, bent column, that's such a weird description. And then getting up there and being like, oh, it's a finger, and there's the implication, another finger jutting from the sand, and it's like, what else is buried underneath there? So fascinating,
incredible. And they're like, it's got fingerprints on it. It's so finely carved, it's impossible that anybody could do that. Very cool. And then of course it does something to Heberic. It charges up his tattoos in a way that's going to help him out through the rest of these chapters.
Well, it seems like it ails him first, right? Because they're going through the desert and he's actually messed up by it. His stump is all swollen and red, and all the tattoos start converging on that point and then start spreading over his whole body. And eventually Felison reveals to keep up the lie in the camp that Heberic wanted her, she had to learn about his boar cult, and that his tattoo that would have let him put his hand on his heart and call his god, that's why his hands were cut off, is because that's the connection point. And they're like, you are excommunicated. You cannot, you're not allowed to do this anymore. And Bowden's like, well, we tried it anyways, and puts the stump on his heart. And the explosion of godlike energy that erupts and just a howling scream just rips through them, and they're bleeding from the ears and the eyes, and it basically almost kills them. And then Heberic's like, what happened?
I feel so much better now. Yeah, that was really cool. It's a great point that I forgot, is that Bowden literally makes him do the thing he wasn't supposed to do, and sort of calls to Fenner, and Fenner, we think, answers in some way.
Well, we're like, why does that happen? And then later, when they get to the beach and Culp sees him, when he turns on his Warren, he basically sees ghost hands at the end of
and there's evidently two different things warring on him, which was awesome too. The Autoteral so there seems to be this implication that Otatarol has its own warren in a way that no one's ever really experienced, and that is kind of because they were in the mines so much. That's really cool. I love all the Otatarol stuff and how there's like this magic dampening force. Awesome.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and another point about him turning the screws on the characters, I loved Bowden has memorized all the different places where there's going to be water along the route. So they've literally been preparing for this epic escape across the desert, and he's got all the springs memorized. And we finally get to when we're so thirsty. Thirsty. Oh, this one is infested with corpse moths.
Yeah.
It's like, I love that. It's like, we did it. Guess what? Can't drink this. We have to walk another 11 hours.
We can just move the moths. He's like, nah, the crap poisoned that thing. So I guess tainted for a long time. It's like, really? The corpse moths crap poison?
Yeah.
Dang it.
Can it get worse? I will also say, just as a general statement in all of these chapters, one of my favorite things that he's doing is using the beasts, the bugs, just the creatures in the environment to paint a picture of how big these events are. It's so evocative, the corpse moths drawn to bodies, so there's these massive migrations of corpse moths because of how much killing is happening right now, how many deaths are happening. And using that as a way to describe the magnitude of what's happening is it's literally changing the ecosystem. It's so cool. It's such a cool way to describe the effect and make the world seem so interconnected and alive. Yeah. Okay, so Mappo has a flashback to when he's young. Man, let's skip ahead to my favorite sequence of this entire section, these 3 chapters. You've kind of talked about it a little bit, but we have Felison, Bowden, Heberick. They get to the beach. They finally get to the beach. They actually can kill some crabs and eat some food, but it's salty. It's going to kill them. It's like, things can't be worse. We have no water. There's no water to drink. We're here where we're supposed to be. We're 5 days late. So there's no hope. But then there's this giant electrical storm out in the water. A boat gets to them. Figures stumble out and are like, help us. Incredible. All those interactions of them meeting each other, Felison insulting everybody, like, we're saved, but things are terrible. Oh, maybe your Otatarol can reject the magic that's out in the water, and maybe we can survive. Just the notion. I mean, it's one of the coolest things. It's not even like the centerpiece of this book. It's just a side thing that's happening, but it's one of the coolest things. One of the coolest images I've ever read in a fantasy book is an insane mage hovering above the water, flopping around, like a puppet, magic shooting out of him, hovering above the ocean, flopping this way and that, just like attacking everything, completely out of control, lost his mind from the mines, and having to deal with that. Like, that is an amazing image.
But is it actually a mage that lost his mind in the mines?
Well, that's what Culp thinks, right?
My brain was like, is that Talk the Younger?
Oh.
For some reason.
See, this is why you are the high mage of reading. Putting things together.
That's true. I don't know if that's put together, but I'm basically this whole time, because Talk was just kind of like, there's a warren, kicked into it, and he's like, and it was just kind of unceremoniously gone from the book. Basically every unexplained mage thing, I'm like, is it Talk? Talk?
Interesting.
So,
that could be.
I mean, it could
I did not
very
make
well,
that connection at all.
I know that that's what they said that it was, and it could very well be that that's the case, which is just so cool. Even if that is the case, it's just somebody who escaped and is now mad. The part that confused me, though, and made me think that is not the case is so Culp and crew land on the beach being like, oh, thank God you're here. We need your help. And they're like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's some mage out there, some sorcery running around like an untrained puppy on a leash. Like somehow leashed into this spot, but like just flailing around like crazy.
Yeah.
And that's when he looks at Heberick and sees his ghost hands. And he's like, one hand looks like a hand and the other hand looks like it's holding a leash.
Yeah.
And I was like, is Heberick somehow connected? Is like the implication that he's the one who's somehow holding on to that puppy's leash.
Interesting.
And then as they leave, they're like, oh man, he's chasing us again. And I'm like, isn't it Heberick?
Interesting.
Is Heberick, is that talk and Heberick somehow connected to him and literally leashing this violent insanity because he's like, well, I don't have hands, but they are apparently dragging that thing along with us. And Culp's like, yeah, just don't talk to anybody about it. Don't say anything about it. We both know you got some ghost hands. Nobody else needs to know about your ghost hands.
That's cool. Again, you're making connections that went way over my head if that's the case, because that's cool. I think that would track and would be amazing. That they're trying to escape this thing and it's literally drawn to them because Heberick is pulling it toward them.
Yeah. But then there's like, I don't know how that works with, the storm appears again, shredding them with like piercing water.
Yeah.
It slices through Stormy's leg.
Yeah.
And Heberick's like, well, worked once before, stick my stump in it. And then the tattoos like seal up the wound. As this, and and all of those people are like believers of Fenner. They're like,
Fenner's that's the best part where he's like, oh sweet, a high mage of our favorite thing, and he's like, screw you guys, I don't believe anymore.
Well,
they're like, oh,
he's like, okay, let's get this boat going, and they're like, where are we going? He's like, I'm not telling you, and they're like, we'll just throw you overboard. And he's like, but you will anger the high mage of Fenner, and they're like, Fenner, sick, let's go! Like immediately excited to go.
That's our boy.
Journey. Yeah.
And Truth is like, oh my god, you're a high mage. I'm like so devout. I love that. And he's like, no, kid.
And he's like, these are middle fingers. But he like puts his stump in the hole. It seals it up. But then Culp and him both saw something transfer between them.
Yeah.
So is that one of his two hands? Which hand was it? Was it the one holding the leash? Like there's like a lot of questions swirling around what's happening with these Fenner interactions.
And Culp keep going, that might change Stormy in some way. Well, can't worry about that now. It's too, and then later he's like, well, Stormy seems the same, so probably was fine. It was probably fine. So this whole sequence, this is some of my favorite stuff I've ever read. The going into the storm, hoping the Atatarol will protect them, things going bad, knowing that they're going down, and they somehow get sucked into the warren of this insane mage. And then they see the boat out there. They're like, well, this one's going down. We got to swim to that one. How that all plays out, the dynamic between everybody, going into Fellison's point of view a few times, but like how everybody's interacting with each other, just the pure badassery of all the sailors knowing what they have to do and how people are saving each other's lives, Bowden like shredding, dislocating all of his fingers, holding on to Stormy over the side, or maybe it was Truth. Anyway, he saves one of the sailors. Yeah. Like all of that, edge of my seat, thrilling, and you think it can't get cooler than this. This is this out of the frying pan into the fire constantly. We made it through the desert. Now we're in the water. I love that part where he's like, well, drowning on the water, it actually sounds kind of good after being in the desert.
You know what they say, out of the desert into the brine.
Yeah, but you think, okay, well, we've been through the desert. That's the worst thing that's going to happen. No, there's a crazy ocean sequence, lightning, topsy-turvy, almost die here. Okay, well, that's the craziest thing that can happen. Oh my gosh, boat. That boat shouldn't be there. Doesn't matter. It's the only somebody says something like it's the only place our feet will have feet will be dry or something cool like that. Swim over to it. Oh, this boat's weird. What's down in the below decks? Oh, there's a bunch of boxes. Let's open those. Oh, there's heads. Those are heads.
They on the main deck. They open the oilskin wrapped packages, and each one has a head in it that they pile up, and they're like, gross. And
let's make a pyramid of heads. That's cool.
I'm like, why don't you just leave them? Like, once you knew one was there, couldn't you just count them while they were still?
Yeah.
Okay, to each their own.
There's a scene in the last season of Barry that I'm gonna spoil a little bit.
No.
Okay, I won't. Never mind. It reminded me of a scene from the last season of Barry. That's all.
I have to see it still.
Okay, never mind. Sorry.
So then was it Culp and Gessler like, well, steal your brains. We're gonna go down below, and I think all of us know there's probably some horrifying stuff down there. And they get down there, and they're like, it's a warren, the sorcery seeping out of it. They're basically walking into something that's been time stopped, and all of the bodies of all the heads at the oars, and they're like, gross, but helpful. I think we all know. Yeah. I think we all know what we have to do here.
Incredible.
Like, find the whistle.
Incredible. Headless army of rowers just sitting there ready to row. Perfectly time stop, puddles of blood still just fresh. And pluck the whistle off of one corpse neck.
Yeah. And you're like, all right, let's go. Hop to tweet, tweet.
The dude with the drums, like just ready to pound the drum. The headless dude with the drums.
So gnarly. My favorite.
What an image. Amazing.
My favorite question that was sort of left on this boat was, everybody's like, this boat, what a freaky boat. And Bowden's like, oh yeah, it's this boat. This is the boat that it specifically is. And people aren't like, there wasn't a name on the boat. He's like, it's the only boat it could be. And everybody just kind of accepts that. I think somebody gives him a side eye, being like,
Phyllis is like, look at the big brain on Brad.
Yeah. And some people are like, he shouldn't know that. Wow, how could he possibly know that? Everybody's like, don't think on it too hard. Onwards. Everything is basically like, if we dwell on this, we will be traumatized in a way that will incapacitate us. So keep on keeping on.
This is going to be bad. Anyway, hoot.
So here's one piece that I couldn't quite put together. The spear in the captain's chest. We notice that these are not Tistiandi. They have the proportions of Tistiandi, but not the features.
Too big.
They're gray. Their hair isn't silver. It's brown.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, this is probably the Tisti Aren. They get Hebrick in there to do his historian thing.
Yeah.
And the only person who was like really had like visible. Oh, they showed like people had just gotten crushed. All their bones were crushed, but there's no blood, like just dead through the cabins. But the captain had a giant barghast spear thrust through his chest. Who else in the book was called out as a barghast? Was it Bowden?
No, I don't think so. It was one of the bridge burners as barghast, right? Wasn't one of the Whiskey Jacks? Maybe. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was Callum.
Yeah.
But
I want to go back and figure that out. But because I'm like, that is some kind of connection there, being like, that is specifically a barghast spear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is Bowden a bridge burner then?
Maybe. Ooh, sick. I don't know.
Connections. There's so many questions.
Connections. but just that the progression of getting them there, and then we have this like moment of quiet where we're just like tiptoeing around the ghost ship, looking at things, just recognizing how bad everything is. I mean, it's so vivid in my mind, them, peering around these headless corpses and lifting the whistle off of one, and then when he blows the whistle,
that in my mouth.
I know. He blows the whistle, and it's like, it doesn't sound like a whistle. It sounds like
the screams of 1,000 souls or something.
It's amazing. And then the boom, 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 boom. Faster than a heartbeat. It's just incredible. And they're going through the water, but the thing is faster than them. But
less fast than the before, because they're going so fast because of these there's a world where this could have been like, oh, there's a bunch of mechanical. They made like a mechanical boat. It's like, no, it's these corpses that are effectively robots.
Heyo. I see what you did there.
And it's also visceral. The clacking of the wood in perfect unison of the oars coming up into flattening and then starting the faster than human ramming speed of the ship is incredible.
Incredible. Like I said, one of my favorite sequences I've ever read in anything. It's just it was so fun. And that's when I texted you, like, this book is incredible. It's so good. How is this book so good? Fiddler and Crocus and Absalar.
I can't. They're like, oh yeah, there's more. There's more.
They get into a confrontation with divers. Tussle, yeah. There are one particular diver that is literally like an ocean of rats, which is bad. And that moment where Fiddler's like, Absalar, grab my last bomb. She's like, bomb's not going to do anything against that. And he's like, it's not for that. It's for us.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And then at the last minute, our boys, Mappo and Ikariam, show up and save the day. And I love too, because Mappo and Ikariam have been this sort of comedic duo, having these kind of goofy little adventures with Pust. And we forget that they're extreme badasses. And you see them through Fiddler's eyes in that POV, and he's like, they're enormous, they're amazing, they scared away the ocean of rats. Yeah, like literally them just saying, don't test me, bro.
And the rats were like, fine.
Yeah. Incredible. And he knows them from their reputation. Like all of that, recontextualizing how amazing and awesome Mappo and Ikariam are. You go like, oh, right. Yes, they're enormous. They're warriors. They've been alive for thousands of years. Like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Looking for a broom is so beneath them.
This is one of the things that I have not quite put together. He's like, wow, they're so cool. But I thought from the first book that like all of the Jaggeds were dead. All of them. And he is a Jag.
Right. Half, right? Isn't he half?
Half, yeah.
Full Trell and half Jag.
Half Jag. But like the fact that people aren't like, what?
Yeah, right.
Like maybe I have like a misunderstanding. Because like even when, Fiddler gets some of his bones crushed, he passes out because he's in it. They're like, can you stand up? And he's like, maybe. And just blacks out instantaneously. Yeah. And then later they're like, oh yeah, your friend, he's like a Jag, right? And he's not like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Since when? I thought they were all dead. And maybe it's just because Ikariam is like known as like another thing because he's half Jag. But like maybe my understanding of the extinction of this race of people is not complete.
Right. Yeah. Interesting question to keep in the back of our heads. I think that's a great thing to point out. I love the scene where he wakes up and how, he's got this broom in his face, which is funny because we found the broom and he uses the broom to like sweep the dude's head, sweep Fiddler's head. Isn't
Fiddler also like, there's spiders in your bristles?
Yeah.
I'm like, man, he really out there killing spiders with this dang broom. He obsessed.
Yeah. And then we get a really interesting sequence of two of our big groups finally together, talking to each other, putting pieces together, realizing what they've got to do. And Pust became much more interesting to me too, because he's like receding into the shadows, coming out, saying stuff and kind of beguiling them with his words. They're like, hey, can words cast spells? Magics? And they're like, oh yes, 100% they can.
I also just love him. I feel like he's gotten zanier and zanier, where he's like, well, everybody knows what you have to do, but do you know what you have to do? And recede into the shadows. And now they can't see me. I just see them perfectly. And they're all like, we can hear you.
My favorite is when he's like, maybe what'll happen is you'll complete your quest and you'll complete your quest and you'll complete your quest and you'll complete your quest. Or maybe none of that'll happen. Bye.
Yeah. And all of them are like, we should complete our quests. That's definitely our own idea.
Yeah.
Well, I love that they're all like, that like is that magic? Is he doing magic on us? I feel dazed. You look dazed, and everybody's just kind of like, we gotta get out of here, and everybody's like, we gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing that all of them are very immediately aligned on.
Yeah. I mean, what an incredible 3 chapters. I feel like there's so much more stuff that we didn't even talk about. There's that sequence with who's our boy with the Aptorian.
Oh yeah, Callum.
Callum with the Aptorian, where he's like riding beside the Aptorian. Is like, man, this is weird. And then then they get attacked by the other divers, and the Aptorian gets all messed up. He's like, hey man, I'll heal you. Aptorian's like, and he's like, okay, dumb, then I won't.
And
heal
he's
you.
also like, look, man, it's not like I wanted to hang out with you either, but your feud is really cramping my style.
Yes. Yeah.
He's also like, don't look at me. Ugh, can't look at it. Want to look at it. Don't look at it. Ugh, good.
Yeah.
Because it's like just a straight up demon.
Yeah. Just like hanging out, riding beside him, keeping his distance, being respectful, being cool.
I keep trying to picture it because it's got like 3 legs or something.
Yeah.
It's one front leg. It's got one eye.
Have you ever seen The Dark Crystal?
Yes.
You know those
Have
things?
I seen The Dark Crystal?
Okay. Well, you know those things that they ride?
It's called a Landstrider.
Thank you. The Landstrider. That's what I'm picturing is the Landstrider.
But with one leg on the front.
Yeah. Yeah. The like loping.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else that we need to get to? Because this is, I'm having so much fun. What a tale. What a tale.
I love that I love going from literally never having heard of Malazan. I talked to people a lot about like fantasy reading, never heard of it before. You're like, you want to try reading these books? And now I'm like their number 1 fan, telling everybody I know about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a dad of a classmate of my son's. I've like sold on this, and he got the audiobook, and he's like, I'm gonna watch your YouTube, and we're gonna watch it. I'm like, yeah, we gotta spread the word, man. These are the best. And I'm curious, Mr. Erikson, have these been optioned? Have they been optioned?
How could you possibly?
Dude, talk about the epic multi-season HBO series, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
like multi-season, like 20 seasons. Well, you mapped out us just talking about all the details from all the books being a year and a half's worth of us doing this book club. How long would the show be?
I know, but it would be so good.
Let me tell you, I'm into it. I'm here for it.
Well, because I keep seeing these images in my head, and I'm like, I know how you shoot this scene. I know exactly how you shoot this scene. It's so cinematic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, I want to say, we got to get to it because we're pushing up on time. We pick our our favorite sentence of the section for each week. I had the hardest time. There are so many incredible sentences in these sequences. I had like a million options. Because like the tiniest little sentence, there's a sentence that I almost picked that was just a complete throwaway thing that captures so much. There was a moment where they go to this fishing town. I think Duker, right before the S hits the F in a big way. Duker and the gang go to this fishing town, and they see a like dogs just rolling in the street over some dead fish.
Yeah,
and I was like, what an amazing image. Mm-hmm. What an amazing throwaway image. But I know so much about this town now from just that little thing. And how things are phrased, little metaphors that are contextual, that are sort of in-universe metaphors that the characters will use that are just, how do you come up with them? And they're just a little throwaway little phrase. It's so exquisite. Mm-hmm. Anyway, do you have a favorite sentence of the section?
I do. I did have a bunch of favorite ones that were very beautiful, but I feel like this one really summed up a lot of my key feelings.
Yeah.
And this is in the camp on the beach when the Culp and crew meet Heberick and crew, and Fellison's going around just being a jerk to everybody. Like, I think she literally, like, anybody who talked to her, she's like, you're dumb, you're ugly, shut up. And
Yeah.
Heberick says, "So," Heberick said, "while the swellings left your tongue, its poison remains." And I was just like, yeah, Fellison, stop being such a jerk.
I love that.
Yeah.
The swelling is left, but the poison's still there. So good. Mine is also from Fellison, and this is her kind of having that moment that you talked about earlier, having that moment of self-reflection, that glimmer of like, why am I such a jerk? And she says, she's thinking about like, was it what caused me to sort of change and be this way? And she goes, maybe it was what I lived through on the march to the galleys. Maybe it was that sea of faces, the storm of hate and mindless fury, of the freedom and hunger to deliver pain writ so plain in all those so very normal faces. Ah,
Mine, that was almost my favorite sentence. Well, right around there. Because she's like, is it just because, like, all the things I experienced in the mines? And it was like, it's just the extreme hate of normal people. Like,
which
that.
doesn't it resonate so much with the last several years of
Mhm.
existence on this
Yeah.
planet of, you know, being shocked and forced into a different mental state because normal human beings can be so hateful.
Yeah.
You just go, oh, what? How?
Mm-hmm.
Beautifully
Yeah.
written, beautifully put. All right. My goodness. So next episode, we're going to do the last two chapters of book 2 of novel 2. Whirlwind, we're doing the last two chapters of Whirlwind, chapters 9 and 10. So that will be next week's assignment. In the meantime, we also have some other books to recommend to you. I think, right? Did you come up with one?
I did. My recommendation this week is much different than my previous recommendations, in that it is technically, I mean, it is a children's book.
Huh.
It's Animal Sensigoria. It's called Voices from the Wild by David Bouchard, who's a Canadian author. And this book was something that inspired me so much as a kid into art and into loving reading. I would rent it from the library every week straight. I'd get back to the library and I'd be like, oh, I have to renew. And they'd be like, are you sure? There's a waiting list. I'm like, I'm not done reading it yet. But I'd read it a million times over. I'd memorized every poem. And there's such beautiful artwork, and it takes you through the five senses and which animals thrive on those senses. It's part of their life. And it's poetry. I think it's really beautiful if you have kids. The art combined with the lyrical nature of the writing and learning about animals too while you're at it, was so enthralling to me when I was a kid. It's one of my favorite gifts to give parents of children, to give their children. So if you haven't checked it out, Voices from the Wild by David Bouchard. I have it like right there.
Voices in the Wild. Wow, I've never heard of it. That's amazing. Great recommendation. Mine is also going to be a little bit different this week because I felt bad last week, kind of trampling all over nonfiction a bit. And we were specific on self-help books. And this is not a self-help book, but it is nonfiction. And it is a book I loved. This is a great one to listen to as an audiobook, but it's also a great read. It's called Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. It's the autobiography of Steve Martin, the genius polymath, comedian, actor, writer, playwright, art lover, musician. I mean, he just is. He's one of my heroes, an incredible human being, it seems, on every level, and an incredible artist for sure. And this is a really insightful look at how he started and what, the sort of wild whirlwind, the maelstrom around his meteoric rise to fame. And he, people don't remember because he's had such a long and storied film career. They don't remember that he was the biggest stand-up comedian on earth. Like, he would play stadiums, and like he was a massive hit, and he was doing this absurdist comedy, the wild and crazy guy. Anyway, it's a fascinating book, and one I highly recommend. Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. All right. That's it for this episode of the DLC Book Club. Thanks so much for watching. As always, we love hearing from you. We love you reading along with us. So if you are doing so, please join our Discord. It's a 5x5 DLC on Discord. And then there's the Book Club thread, Deadhouse Gates, Gardens of the Moon are both in there. You can comment. You can bring up topics for our non-spoiler section at the beginning. Anything you'd like to do. We love hearing from you. And we love reading along with you. And we love dancing. It's true.
When the world's too dark of a place to be, and you need an escape from reality, open up those pages, it's sci-fi or fantasy, whatever genre you please. And join a book club, 'cause you won't read it on your own. Join a book club, so you'll be held accountable. It's just a means to an end, but you're doing